And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Once again, looking at the NOAA weather radio outage, again, it began 2 p.m. Friday, August 25th, runs through 5 p.m. Monday, August 28th, and that's for the NOAA weather radio stations of Utaqagavik, Kotzebue, Nome, Bethel, St. Paul, Unalaska, Cold Bay, and Yakutat. And again, weather forecasts and warnings and tsunami information will continue to be available at weather.gov and tsunami.gov. Taking a look at tonight's weather, next system bringing some wind and rain into the central Aleutians, otherwise high pressure, light winds here along the southeast, all of the eastern Bering Sea, all the way up to the western Arctic coast. A little breezy here along the central and eastern Arctic coast due to the cold front, another trough up there with rain all the way down into the Kobuk-Koyukuk valleys. Warm front spreading rain northward again, but not much in the way of wind. You can see not much of a gradient with this. Into the southeast interior, stays fair with light winds over the panhandle. That continues into Monday as well with periods of rain here as this low tracks northward toward Kodiak. So rain from Kodiak Island right up into south central Alaska, the North Gulf Coast, Copper River Basin. Some of that getting north of the eastern Alaska Range. Light winds, high pressure here over the eastern Bering Sea into the Chukchi Sea and the Arctic coast. And windiest conditions out here ahead of this front as it pushes in toward the eastern Aleutians. And then for Tuesday, that front kind of elongates out right along the Aleutian chain there and weakens with just some areas of light precipitation associated with it. Basically lighter winds now for the Bering Sea, especially the Chukchi Sea and the North Slope areas, with this warm front bringing some rain up into the western northern interior, mostly over the eastern Brooks Range and then southwestward there. Southern Alaska, cloudy and areas of rain and showers. Panhandle, cooler, cloudier with a chance of some moisture. And for the coastal water forecast, central and south coast, northwest winds 10 knots, 6-foot seas. Otherwise variable winds at 10 knots for the north coast. Southeast of 15, Lynn Canal north 15 for Stevens Passage, and Clarence Strait northwesterlies at 10 knots. Outlook for Tuesday, Clarence Strait southeast at 15, otherwise south to southeast winds at 10 knots for the central northern inner channels. And for the south coast here, south to southeast winds 10 to 15 knots, east-southeast at 15 for the central coast, north coast east at 15 knots, seas 4 to 5 feet. Prince William Sound for Monday, east winds at 15 knots, seas 2 feet. And for the eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast at 15, northeast 20 for the western North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, east winds 25 knots, small crafts also for Kamishak Bay, for northwest at 25 knots, northeast 25 knot winds for southern Cook Inlet, variable at 15 north of the Forelands. For Tuesday, Cook Inlet northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. Small craft advisories here, a little bit stronger winds in store for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands out of the southeast at 30 knots. North Gulf Coast, southeast winds 20 knots, seas 6 feet. And Prince William Sound, southeast winds 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Kodiak Island, small craft advisories for Monday, northeast winds 25 knots, 6-foot seas, north to northeast winds of 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, north at 10 for the Bristol Bay area. Those turn southwest at 10 for Bristol Bay on Tuesday. And kind of variable winds here for the Alaska Peninsula, 10 to 15 knots, seas running 2 to 6 feet. Kodiak Island, south winds 15 to 20 knots. Eastern Aleutian, southeast winds 20 to 30 knots. Adak and Atka, southeast winds 30 knots with 7 to 10-foot seas. And then the western Aleutians out here looking at northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And for Tuesday, western Aleutians from Kiska to Shimya, north to northeast 25 knots. And then north to northeast winds at about 15 knots for the central areas. Eastern Aleutians, east-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. And for the southwest coast, not much in the way of winds, just a 5 to 15 knot breeze out of the east-northeast tomorrow with high pressure here to the north. Kind of should hopefully clear it out a little bit there. And southeast 15 for the Pribilos, variable at 10 for St. Matthew Island. West winds 5 to 10, St. Lawrence Island into Norton Sound. And then for Tuesday, Norton Sound, northeast at 20, north 20 here for the southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island. Northeast winds 20 knots. Pribilof Islands, St. Matthew Island with 5 to 6 foot seas. And for tomorrow, gale warnings for the eastern Arctic coast here around Barter Island, Kaktovik, the demarcation point. West winds 40 knots, west at 30 knots for the eastern Arctic coast. Small craft advisories for the central coast, northwest at 25 knots, northwest 20 on the western coast. Chukchi Sea, variable winds 10 to 15 knots. For Tuesday, for the Chukchi Sea, south to southeast breeze at 5 to 15 knots. Southerly winds at 20 knots here for the central and western Arctic coast. Lighter winds here switching direction, becoming much lighter than tomorrow there. East winds at 15 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas.